Welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha, a podcast shared by David Roylance. This podcast is dedicated to guiding you to completely eliminate the discontent mind and the suffering it causes by attaining enlightenment. Learn and practice the teachings of Gotama Buddha that will guide you to fully attain a peaceful, calm, serene, and content mind with joy. To support this podcast, visit patreon.com/support Buddha or visit buddhadailywisdom.com, where you will discover a full range of courses, retreats, and online learning resources to assist you on the path to enlightenment. Now, here's our teacher to share more.
Sawadee Kap. Hello and welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha. Today is our group learning program, and we're in a third part of our three-part series where I'm diving into detail on the Eightfold Path. Today we're going to be discussing the mental discipline section, where in the past we did the wisdom section and the moral conduct section. Here at the beginning of the group learning program, we're going deeply into the Eightfold Path because this is a core central teaching of the Buddha, and it's going to help you to understand the path to enlightenment. And then we're going to be starting eventually where we're going to be going chapter by chapter in this book, Developing a Life Practice, the Path That Leads to Enlightenment. We're going to be starting chapter 1 in about 2 weeks from now. But for now, we're going to be diving into the mental discipline section, helping you understand right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. So I'd like to welcome all of you, whether you're joining for the first time or you've been joining regularly, and invite you to ask questions as we go. You can ask those through YouTube, Facebook, or in Zoom. You can put those in the comment section, and I'll be able to see those and answer any questions that you might have. If you're in Zoom, you can electronically raise your hand and ask any questions or follow-up questions directly. So it's really wonderful that you've decided to join for today's class, and now I'll just go ahead and use some visual aids to help us to go forward in our class today. As we get started, I would like to just be sure that I share with you guys that from now on, we're going to be live streaming this class at 9 a.m. and 9 p.m. on Sunday, Wednesday, and then on Saturday, the Pali, Canon, and English study group is also going to be live streamed at 9 a.m. and 9 p.m. The 9 a.m. class, Thai time, is going to be done from the temple where I teach, and then the 9 p.m. class is going to be done here from my home. So you can attend either of these classes, or Bruce has actually decided to attend both today. He was there at the temple, and then now here he is as well. So those of you guys that are in like North America, Central America, and South America, you'll have new options now of a Saturday evening class, a Tuesday evening class, and a Friday evening class, in addition to the classes that you've already had, which is Sunday morning, Wednesday morning, and then Saturday morning. And then for those of you guys in places like Australia, Korea, Japan, China, all those places east of Thailand, even the Philippines and places like that, you'll now have the ability to watch a live class rather than just the replay, because you guys have been asleep in the past and haven't been able to tune in live. So I just thought I'd take a moment here to make you all aware of this new option of learning. And then these are all recorded on our Facebook page, our YouTube channel, and then the podcast will have the evening class on the podcast. So let's talk about the Eightfold Path as it relates to what we're planning to discuss today, which is this mental discipline section of the Eightfold Path. If you remember from our previous classes, we've been discussing all these other steps leading up to right effort in the mental discipline section. We discussed right view, where we were talking about the three universal truths and the four noble truths. With those, we were discussing how craving, desire, attachment, this mental longing and strong eagerness in the mind is what's causing the anger, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, boredom, loneliness, shyness, resentment, jealousy, all these discontent feelings in others. And I invited you to not only learn, but to also reflect on that through your own direct experience and be able to see that it's your own mind that's causing these discontent feelings. And then invited you to practice so that now you can start looking inward and start seeing in situations where your mind is experiencing discontentedness, whether it's conditioned pleasant feelings, painful feelings or neither painful nor pleasant, you can see that your mind's causing that itself. Where what we typically do in the unenlightened state before we have right view is we start to blame other people, or we will push people away or push a situation away, or we'll become bitter and harsh and hostile towards people, or we'll put our expectations on people, trying to force and control them to do things our way. But when we establish right view, we start to see the truth more and more clearly, that our own mind is causing these discontent feelings. And now we can take responsibility for that. And now we can apply effort and energy towards learning and investigating the teachings about how to eliminate it from the mind. We can have this breakthrough where we establish right view and see the truth that our own mind is causing these feelings. Then we talked about right intention, where I helped you understand 3 intentions or thinking or thoughts: the intention of renunciation, the intention of non-ill will, and the intention of harmlessness. That intention of renunciation, that is there to help you understand that you're going to need to let go. The mind's going to need to let go of certain things that it's holding on to now that isn't actually true. There's certain false beliefs, certain false opinions, misperceptions, misunderstandings that the mind's holding on to, and that's why the mind is experiencing the discontentedness. There's a certain amount of unknowing of true reality that's in the mind, and you're going to need to uproot this and let this go. These false beliefs, misperceptions, and misunderstandings are leading to confusion in the mind, and this is why the mind lacks the ability to have control, which is what we're going to be talking about today with mental discipline. One of the first things that the mind needs to be willing to let go of is that other people are causing you to be angry, or this situation is causing you to be annoyed. You need to be able to practice the intention of renunciation and see that it's not, in fact, other people that are causing you to be discontent, but instead the mind itself is causing itself to be discontent. So there's various things along the path that you're going to need to practice this intention of renunciation and willing to let go of these false beliefs and misperceptions. But you're doing that through wisdom. You're not just blindly, blanketly letting go of everything that it is that you've ever learned in life, because there's certain things that you've learned that have been helpful to your life and helped you to be a better and better human being. But now you're starting to learn other things that you haven't been exposed to before. And that's why you're being invited and guided to learn these things, to reflect on them, to independently verify them, and then to practice them and see the truth for yourself. And this is how you get to wisdom. And now you can move out these false beliefs, these misperceptions and misunderstandings, and now your mind can have stability and steadiness, because now you have wisdom of knowing the truth about how to become a better and better human being, essentially. And then there's the intention of non-ill will, which is the same thing as goodwill or loving kindness. And then there's the intention of harmlessness, where you're disinterested or incapable of causing harm to others. Because as long as you're causing harm to others, this harm is going to come back to you. And that's where you start learning about the moral conduct section. And we talked a little bit about the natural law of Gotama, of cause and effect, or action and result, the results of your decisions. Not a mystical, magical thing, not a black cloud, not anybody controlling anything or any punishments or rewards, but instead that everything we experience is a result of our decisions. This is the cause and effect, or action and result, of this natural law. And the Buddha is sharing this moral conduct in order to help you see how you can purify your conduct in a way that doesn't cause harm to others, and then harm doesn't come back to you. So in right speech, we learned about eliminating the lying, the slander, the harsh speech, the frivolous speech. This was the first layer of detail in the Eightfold Path related to right speech. And then we went deeper and we started talking about the 5 factors of well-spoken speech, about how we can speak at the right time, what we say is true, speak gentle, speak beneficial, and with a mind of loving kindness. And when we learn to speak this way, and it's going to take time to gradually train the mind to be able to do that, but when we do gradually learn to speak that way, we'll see that our relationships start to really blossom and our mind can be more peaceful, because we've developed a practice. While it might have been a challenge to get there, we've developed this practice that we can now interact with people in very loving and kind ways and not cause harm through our speech. Then the Buddha taught about right action, where there's these bodily actions of killing, stealing, and sexual misconduct that can cause harm to others, and this harm comes back to us based on our decisions. When we talk about chapter 7, which is called the 5 precepts, we're going to go into a lot of detail about these particular actions and some other things as well, where you're going to see much more illuminating language on right action to be able to understand that it's not black and white. It's not that you would never, ever, ever, ever kill, but it's not that you would always preserve life at all costs. That's not going to lead to this middle way in practicing. So we're going to be discussing that when we get to chapter 7, which will plug in to right action. And also remember that those 3 actions that the Buddha described, it's not like he gave us an entire list of everything that would cause harm through our bodily actions. Like he didn't talk about punching someone in the face or rolling our suitcase down the aisle of a plane, running over people's feet and their knees, because he gave the 3 most harmful things that we can do in terms of our bodily actions. But then if you understand this step, then you can apply it to all other areas of your life and ensure that as you move about the world with your bodily actions, you're not causing harm. Then we talked about right livelihood, which is all about how you sustain your life. By sustaining your life, when you're not harming others, then your life can be fulfilling because your livelihood will be able to be sustainable and long term. Whereas if we cause harm through the way that we sustain our life, then we're going to have difficulties in our life because our income is going to have difficulties, and we're going to have difficulties where if we're causing harm, harm can come to us. The Buddha talked about the 5 trades not to be plied in terms of selling weapons or living beings or meat or substances that cause heedlessness or poisons. If we're involved in any of those trades, then we're causing harm through our activity to sustain our life, and now this harm can come back to us. And I gave you examples on that. Then we talked about things like scheming, flattery, hinting, belittling, pursuing gain with gain, and I went into details about what those things are. So with the wisdom section and moral conduct section, now we're going to build on top of this the mental discipline section of right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration, which is going to help you to then be able to practice things like right intention and right speech and all these other steps that we've just kind of refreshed your memory about. So we're going to start with talking about right effort, which I'm going to be using the words of the Buddha, which I will typically do in these classes because it's really helpful to study with the original words of the Buddha. You'd be surprised that there's plenty of people in the world that consider themselves to be Buddhist practitioners, but they're not studying with the original words of the Buddha. By studying with the original words of the Buddha, you know what he did teach and what he didn't teach. And then if you have a teacher to guide you, you can understand the teachings even more deeply. The teachings of the Buddha and the way that a Buddha speaks is very clear and very concise and very precise. You don't need to interpret his words, but it does help to have a teacher guide you through to be able to see what he's teaching, because some of his teachings are sometimes connected to other teachings that you might not have learned yet. So kind of as a tour guide, I can kind of point things out to you and show you what he's actually teaching you and then help you to understand how to practice it. So this step 6, as part of the mental discipline section, right effort, I'm going to read exactly what the Buddha taught during his lifetime, and then I'm going to break it down for you and show you how to actually implement it in your daily life, applying it to certain situations that you might encounter from time to time. So here's the words of the Buddha. In what, monks, is right effort? Here, monks, a monk rouses his will, makes an effort, stirs up energy, exerts his mind, and strives to prevent the arising of unarisen, evil, unwholesome mental states. He rouses his will, makes an effort, stirs up energy, exerts his mind, and strives to overcome evil, unwholesome mental states that have arisen. He rouses his will, makes an effort, stirs up energy, exerts his mind, and strives to produce unarisen, wholesome mental states. He rouses his will, makes an effort, stirs up energy, exerts his mind, and strives to maintain wholesome mental states that have arisen, not to let them fade away, to bring them to greater growth, to the full perfection of development. This is called right effort. So here the Buddha is providing 4 aspects of right effort to be able to help you understand how to practice and apply this in your daily life. So let me share with you what the Buddha is actually sharing here, broken down in a way that you can digest it and then apply it to specific examples. This first aspect of right effort out of the 4 is to prevent unwholesome mental states that have not arisen from arising in the mind. What he's describing here is that if there's certain unwholesome mental states that are not currently in the mind, he's saying prevent those from ever coming into the mind. And an example that I think about that probably applies to the vast majority of human beings is that we're not thinking about killing another human being. It's not something that's currently in your mind. This is an unwholesome mental state if this was in the mind, but that's not currently in your mind. You don't have any thoughts of going out and killing another human being. And what the Buddha is saying is apply the effort to prevent that from ever coming into the mind. Don't allow that to come into the mind. Apply the effort to prevent this unwholesome mental state of being interested or wanting to kill another human being. And this is the first aspect of right effort, is to prevent unwholesome mental states that have not arisen from arising in the mind. Don't allow it to ever come into the mind because you know that that would cause harm. Then number 2 is abandon unwholesome mental states that have arisen in the mind. What this is referring to is any unwholesome mental states that are currently in the mind. He's saying eliminate those, abandon those, apply the effort to get rid of those. And that's what the path is going to help you learn how to do of all of these things, but you're going to need to apply the effort to be able to do that. It's not going to just happen automatically. You need to apply the right effort to abandon anything in the mind that's unwholesome. Some examples that I thought about in order to provide these to you is that if you're currently in a relationship and you are having a craving to go outside your existing relationship for sexual contact, you know that that's going to cause harm to your current partner, to yourself, to other people around you. This is why we get sexually transmitted diseases and people have been injured and beat up and murdered in these kinds of situations. So it would be unwise to go out and have sexual contact outside of a current existing relationship. So if that's currently in the mind, you would like to apply the effort to abandon that, get that out of the mind. Don't allow the mind to go forward with those actions. Instead, cut that off and eliminate it, applying effort to do so. Another example might be if there's anger, frustration, or irritation that arises in the mind. This is an unwholesome quality of mind, so you'd like to cut that off and let it go. You like to abandon that and get that out of the mind, applying right effort. You're going to get more help today to understand how to do this, right? So this is just the first step of explaining what to do, which is apply effort to get rid of these unwholesome qualities that have arisen. Then the third aspect is produce unarisen wholesome mental states to arise in the mind. So this is any wholesome mental states that you learn about as part of this path that are not currently in the mind. You would like to apply the effort to bring those into the mind. This is called right effort, the third aspect of right effort, where you're applying effort to bring into the mind certain wholesome mental states to arise. Some wholesome mental states that you might think about in terms of what you're learning on this path to enlightenment is that generosity is an important mental quality to have in order to make your way to enlightenment. What generosity is sharing your time, effort, energy, and resources more than is strictly required in any given situation without any expectation of anything in return. So this is giving and sharing. This is going to help you eliminate the craving, desire, attachment that is in right view, where the Buddha explains to you that it's craving, desire, attachment that's causing the mind to be discontent. Because when we're selfish, we tend to hold on to things really tightly. But when we practice generosity, sharing our time, effort, energy, and resources, then our mind is trained to let go. And you're going to need to learn how to do this from the middle way, where you're not excessively sharing, but you're also not being stingy and holding on to things really tight either. You're going to need to practice this generosity. Well, if you know in your current mind that you're not a generous person, maybe you're quite stingy or selfish, you're not a bad person. You just haven't learned that generosity is a very important mental quality to practice. So now, as you start learning about these teachings and you learn something like generosity, knowing that that's not in the mind, you would then apply effort and energy to bring that into the mind. This is the third aspect of producing this unarisen, wholesome mental state, applying the effort to arise generosity in the mind. Same thing, another example might be compassion. Compassion is the concern for the misfortune of others, where on one side, the mind might be indifferent. When you see people are experiencing unfortunate circumstances, you could just be indifferent and you might not care. But then the other side of that is you might be worried, or you might have anxiety, and you might feel like you have to help every single being that you encounter. Well, in either side, the mind's not going to be peaceful and joyful. So you would like to practice this compassion, where you bring the mind to the middle and you have this concern for the misfortune of others. Well, if you notice that your mind currently doesn't have compassion, that your need to produce that in the mind, then you apply the effort to be able to produce this unarisen, wholesome mental state and bring it into the mind. The fourth aspect of right effort is to maintain wholesome mental states that have arisen, not allowing them to fade away, and work to increase their growth in the mind. So this is any wholesome mental states that are currently in the mind. You would like to apply the effort to support those, encourage those. Don't allow them to fade. Bring them to the full development and full perfection. Continue to develop them in the mind and bring them to greater growth and improvement in the mind. Some examples might be loving kindness. If you currently have loving kindness in the mind, which is this genuine interest in seeing other beings be well, this goodwill towards others, if you currently have that in the mind, you would like to support that, encourage it, maintain it, bring it to full growth and perfection in the mind. Or if you have sympathetic joy, what this is this is where you have joy for others' success, even if you didn't contribute to it. It's the opposite of jealousy or envy. So if you notice that when something happens for somebody, maybe they buy a new house, or they get a new boyfriend or a new girlfriend, they get a new job, maybe they win the lottery, who knows what might happen that's very fortunate for somebody. Maybe they experience some education where they learn something and they get a degree. If you're noticing that you have this joy for their success, even though you didn't contribute to their success, then this is sympathetic joy. And if that's currently in the mind, then you would like to support that, encourage it, and don't allow it to fade. Bring it to full growth and perfection in the mind. In these examples that I'm providing you, these are just examples. The unwholesome qualities that are not yet in your mind are going to be unique to you. The unwholesome qualities that are currently in your mind, that's going to be unique to you. The wholesome qualities that are not yet in your mind, that's going to be unique to you. And the wholesome qualities that are currently in your mind, that's also going to be unique to you. So the next step that we're going to be talking about is going to help you to be able to discover what are the unwholesome qualities that are either in the mind or the wholesome qualities that are currently in the mind, so that then you can either eliminate or cultivate by applying right effort. So these are the 4 right efforts: to prevent unwholesome qualities from arising, abandon any unwholesome qualities that are currently in the mind, produce wholesome qualities to come into the mind, and then maintain wholesome qualities that are currently in the mind. The way that I teach this to my young son is I explain to him, anything that's unwholesome, kick it out, get rid of it. Anything that's wholesome, bring it into the mind. And as you're learning on this path, you're going to learn about the unwholesome qualities of mind, and you're going to learn about the wholesome qualities. And then you're not believing that. You're going to learn, you're going to reflect and understand, like, yeah, if I practice generosity and compassion, yeah, that would be really wise. Or if I practice loving kindness and compassion and sympathetic joy, that would be really wise. Let me bring that into the mind. So you start reflecting on it and seeing how your life has improved whenever you practice these types of practices and these mental qualities. And then when you have learned, when you've reflected, and then you practice, then that's where you see the real transformation in the mind. So some of these qualities that we're talking about, we're going to be discussing at different times, whether it's in chapter 14 when we discuss the Brahma Viharas, or in chapter 10 when we talk about merit. We're going to be talking about all these different things at different times, and others as well. So you will learn these unwholesome and wholesome qualities, and then you're going to need to apply right effort to be able to then practice them. Let me see what questions you guys might have on this. You can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions or follow-up questions directly. All right, I'm not seeing any questions here, so let's go ahead and move on to the next part, which is right mindfulness. Right effort and right mindfulness are really connected together. These go hand in hand. You wouldn't be able to practice right effort without having practiced and understood right mindfulness. So you're going to need to understand what it is and be able to practice it. So again, I'm going to read it to you in the words of the Buddha so you see what he's actually teaching, and then I'm going to share it with you in a way that you'll understand how to break it down and then actually practice it in daily life. Here what the Buddha is sharing is he says, in what, monks, is right mindfulness? Here, monks, a monk resides reflecting on body as body, dedicated, clearly aware, and mindful, having put aside craving and worry for the world. He resides reflecting on feelings as feelings, dedicated, clearly aware, and mindful, having put aside craving and worry for the world. He resides reflecting on mind as mind, dedicated, clearly aware, and mindful, having put aside craving and worry for the world. He resides reflecting on mental objects as mental objects, dedicated, clearly aware, and mindful, having put aside craving and worry for the world. So again, the Buddha is talking about 4 different things. He's talking about what we refer to as the 4 foundations of mindfulness. He's talking about body as body, feelings as feelings, mind as mind, mental objects as mental objects. So let me explain to you what the 4 foundations of mindfulness are, and then how to practice these in daily life. First, whenever we're talking about mindfulness as you're first getting started on the path to enlightenment like this, the best thing you could probably do is just start out with a basic understanding of what mindfulness is, because not everybody's using this word in the same way. And you're going to need to understand what mindfulness is and the way to think about it. So what mindfulness is awareness of mind. Not everybody's using it that way. Some people use it as careful. They'll say, can you mindfully carry this glass of water to that table? What they're really saying is, can you carefully carry it, right? So what mindfulness means in the way that the Buddha teaches it and all of his other teachings as well, is it's just awareness of mind. This is what you're working to develop. And when you first get started on this path, you might just choose to think about right mindfulness as awareness of mind. And I'm going to teach you here what the 4 foundations of mindfulness are, and then we're going to be talking about these at different times during our program. But for now, you might just think about right mindfulness as awareness of mind. Because if you're going to apply right effort to either eliminate certain unwholesome qualities or cultivate certain wholesome qualities, you're going to need to have awareness of mind. And typically when we're not on this path to enlightenment, we don't have awareness of mind. We're just going through the world, kind of plowing through the world, making haphazard decisions. I describe it as knocking down the trees and burning up the forest. And this is what we tend to do in the unenlightened state, because we're just unaware of what's going on in our own mind. We're typically going around blaming other people for the things that we're experiencing. So what you would like to start doing with your meditation of breathing mindfulness meditation, and then practicing in your daily life, is start practicing this awareness of mind, where you start becoming aware of what's in the mind. Then over time, as you develop your meditation practice more and you develop your mind outside of meditation, you would like to develop what's called the 4 foundations of mindfulness. This is where the Buddha talks about body as body, feelings as feelings, mind as mind, mental objects as mental objects. What he's describing here is gain this awareness of the bodily sensations, the feelings, the condition of the mind, and the mental objects. What he's talking about with the bodily sensations is that prior to your mind getting a feeling of like anger or frustration or agitation, any conditioned feeling, even those conditioned pleasant feelings, all the conditioned painful feelings, and the neither painful nor pleasant, there's going to be some bodily sensation that's occurring prior to the mind actually experiencing the feeling. So if you've ever taken note that prior to your mind getting angry, you might have noticed tightening in the stomach, a tightening in the chest, maybe some pain around the heart. You might have noticed a sensation rising up the torso of the body. You might have noticed some heat in the face or pressure in the skull. If you've ever noticed this, this is the bodily sensations associated with anger that is about to arise. If you haven't noticed these kinds of things, start paying attention to them. We even talk about it like shyness. We'll say, oh, do you have butterflies in your stomach? What that really is just queasiness in the stomach. That's the bodily sensation of shyness that is about to arise. And each one of these discontent feelings, whether it's a conditioned pleasant feeling, painful feeling, or neither painful nor pleasant, there's going to be some bodily sensation associated with that. And you're going to need to start developing awareness of that eventually as you get going on this path. Again, you can start with just awareness of mind, but ultimately you would like to start becoming aware of these bodily sensations. And if you're not aware of them yet, start paying attention, that you'll start noticing before the mind gets agitated or annoyed or some other discontent feeling, there's a bodily sensation associated with it. Then, after the bodily sensation, there's going to be a feeling where now the anger has entered the mind as a feeling. Then, after it becomes a feeling, it will start to affect the condition of the mind for a few hours or a few days or a week or two. If you've ever been angry or frustrated for a week or two, this is because of the condition of the mind has been affected by the feelings that have come into the mind. Then it's going to feed what we call a mental object. What a mental object is this is a deeply rooted container in the mind that something, in this case, is ill will. When we're talking about anger, the mental object associated with anger is ill will. And now this deeply rooted container is getting filled up more and more and more because there isn't any action. There hasn't been any right effort applied to train the mind to eliminate these discontent feelings. Because prior to getting on the path, we don't even know that these whole process is happening. We don't even understand that we can get rid of sadness or anger or these other discontent feelings. So what the Buddha is cluing you into here in this particular step is he's explaining to you the life cycle or the process that is going to occur as a result of craving, desire, attachment being in the mind. When you have craving, desire, attachment in the mind where you're longing and yearning, wanting things to be a certain way, chasing after certain things, if you get what you want, you'll get pleasant feelings. If you don't get what you want, you get painful feelings. And then there's those neither painful nor pleasant feelings. So with that craving in the mind, if you get what you want, you're going to notice that there's these bodily sensations. You might notice tingling in your shoulders or in your neck or the back of your skull, that there's this pleasant feeling of happiness, excitement, elation, thrill, euphoria that is about to come into the mind. And now as it passes through the bodily sensations, it's going to become a feeling, it's going to affect the condition of the mind, and then it's going to feed this mental object, in this example, central desire. But then if you don't get what you want, now, again, because of craving being in the mind's going to experience these bodily sensations of frustration, agitation, annoyance, whatever it is. There's going to be other types of bodily sensations that you need to clue into, that now those are going to arise, and then boom, the mind is angry or frustrated or irritated. Then it's going to affect the condition of the mind for multiple hours or multiple days, and then it's going to feed this mental object of ill will. So what you're going to need to be able to do is to be able to be aware of these four foundations of mindfulness. Through your meditation practice, you'll develop more and more awareness of the mind. And then in daily life, you can practice more and more awareness of these bodily sensations, feelings, condition of the mind, and the mental objects. Because then you start applying right effort to cut off and let go of these conditioned feelings arising as a bodily sensation. Essentially, the unenlightened mind is wired to have these conditioned feelings, that if you get what you want, you get those conditioned pleasant feelings, but they arise, they change, and they fade away. So they're ultimately dissatisfying. So as long as you allow the mind to continue to get these conditioned pleasant feelings, and it continues to be wired like that, you're going to eventually experience the conditioned painful feelings, the sadness, anger, frustration, and others. What you're looking to get to is this unconditioned joy, where the mind doesn't need all these conditions to be met in order to experience the happiness and the joy. So in the unenlightened mind, there's these conditioned feelings that if this happens and this happens and this happens and this happens, then I will be happy. But if those conditions aren't met, the mind will then experience anger, sadness, frustration, and others. So this right mindfulness is cluing you in that there's these bodily sensations that you need to be aware of. And now as you're aware of those bodily sensations and you're noticing that these are starting to arise based on cravings, desires, attachments, you can cut them off and let them go, avoiding having to experience that conditioned feeling. You're not suppressing the feeling. Some people think that that's what they're doing. But what you're doing is you're cutting it off before it even becomes a feeling. You're not suppressing it. You're cutting it off before it ever becomes a feeling. It's kind of like if you were in a boat going from North America to England. If you're out in the middle of the ocean, you would like to prevent the water from ever coming into the boat. Because once it gets into the boat, you've got a real problem to deal with. You've got to get this water out of the boat and you can sink very easily. So once the feeling of anger comes into the mind as a feeling, you've got a real problem to deal with now, and you've got to get rid of it because it's going to start affecting the condition of the mind more long term, and it's going to feed this mental object, this deeply rooted mental object of ill will. So if you can, over time, through your meditation practice and practice in daily life, become aware of these bodily sensations, it's kind of like an early warning system that your mind's about to become angry. And you have a few seconds, and sometimes it's 1 or 2 or 3 seconds. As you develop your practice longer and longer and more, that can elongate to about 8 or 10 seconds where you've got the ability to take right effort and apply the effort to cut off and let go of any arising discontentedness as a bodily sensation. And now you're disconnecting this process where the mind is wired to experience conditioned feelings. You're decoupling that, you're breaking that, and now you're not allowing the mind to experience those conditioned feelings. You're restraining the mind through mental discipline. You're starting to control the mind and pull the mind back. Over time, as you do this more and more, you'll get to the point where you've eliminated all the cravings, desires, attachments, and you won't experience conditioned feelings anymore. That you've let go of all these temporary feelings where the mind's going up and down and up and down, and now you can just experience the unconditioned joy and the peacefulness and the calm that's in the mind, because the mind's not chasing, and only gets happy when you get what you want and gets angry and sad when you don't get what you want. That process has been decoupled, essentially. It's been disintegrated. You don't allow the mind to continue to fire that way and be wired that way. So the Buddha is explaining to you here the process that the mind's going to go through as part of this having craving in the mind, that now you can start taking action. But again, you're going to need to build up your awareness of this. And that's where your meditation practice of 2 to 3 meditations per day is going to help you to build up to that. And again, you're going to need to build up your meditation practice too. We're just at the very beginning of our program here. And if you're brand new to the teachings of the Buddha, there's a number of different things that you're going to need to develop. And that's why this program is 7 months, and I'm able to help you to gradually understand what to build up. And here we're giving you an overview of all the various things that you're going to need to learn as you go forward. And then as we start with the program, I'll actually help you to actually build it up step by step each week. But here I would like to just pause and see if you guys have any questions about right mindfulness in terms of awareness of mind and what that is, and these 4 foundations of mindfulness, because you might not be aware of these 4 foundations if you haven't really clued into them before. You can put it into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or raise your hand in Zoom and I'll be able to call on you. Looks like Steve has a question here from Zoom. Oh, it says no questions, but wanted to mention that I've read many books on the Four Noble Truths and Eightfold Path, but never in the context of the direct words from the Buddha. I've always wondered, when I heard different teachings that conflicted, what did the Buddha say? This is very helpful to base teachings directly on what Buddha said, and is what I've been searching for. Thank you, teacher. Yes, absolutely, I agree. There's so many books, so many resources out there in the world, so many people teaching and labeling what they're teaching as Buddhism or from the Buddha. But it's not until you use his original words that you can see for yourself what did he teach and what he didn't teach. And then you don't believe it, because these words, these books that I share, right, they've been through different impermanence over 2,500 years. So what I've done is ensured that what I'm providing, I've confirmed in 4 different ways. It's in the original source teachings of the Buddha. I practiced it for myself, never believing the teachings, but practicing it and seeing the results that it produced. Then I've been sharing it with students now for many years, and they're reporting to me that, yes, they're seeing the improvement to the condition of their mind as well. And then the 4th way is, from time to time, I'm around Thai people that will know that I'm teaching the Buddhist teachings, and they'll ask me, what are you teaching for meditation, or what are you teaching for the Four Noble Truths, and things like this. And then I'll share it with them, and they're like, oh, that's really interesting. You're teaching exactly the same thing that this Thai monk, who the community knows is enlightened, you're teaching the exact same thing that he's teaching. So what you're teaching, we consider to be the teachings of the Buddha. And this is why the Thai people invite me to teach at the temple and go to different events and special events and so forth, because they know what I'm sharing is the original teachings of the Buddha based on what they consider to be the original teachings, using his own words, based on enlightened monks and ordained practitioners that are here in Thailand. So you can have confidence that I've confirmed everything I share with you. It's either in the original source teachings, I've practiced it for myself, I've shared it with students for a while now, and they're experiencing benefit. And Thai people are confirming that, yes, this is what we consider to be the teachings that lead to enlightenment, based on people here that are teaching and that we know that are enlightened. But even with that, you don't believe what I share. Just know and have confidence that what I'm sharing has been verified. And then you do the same thing. You learn, you reflect, independently verify, and then you practice and see the truth for yourself, that it actually works to improve the condition of your mind. Because you know, in situations where you were angry or sad or frustrated or had fear or guilt or shame or any of these other discontent feelings, and as you gradually build up your practice in the way that I'm describing, you'll see that those feelings start to fade away and they start to be eliminated as you apply all the various factors of the Eightfold Path. Let me see if we have any questions anywhere else on our platforms. I'm not seeing any questions anywhere else, so we'll go ahead and move on to the next step, which is right concentration. Right concentration in the Eightfold Path is being described by the Buddha, and he's describing what's called the jhanas. I'm not going to actually read this to you guys. You guys are welcome to read it. It's here on the screen. It's also in the book as part of Volume 1, Chapter 5, and it's in other places in the book series as well. What he's describing is he's actually describing the results or the benefits of having practiced all the teachings in the Eightfold Path. What you're going to notice as you put together and develop your practice, you're going to start experiencing what we refer to as the jhanas. These are the only 2 Pali words that I use, which is kama and jhana. They don't translate to just one English word, or I would use those English words. What a jhana is it's a preliminary phase that the mind experiences before it moves into the first stage of enlightenment. There's 4 preliminary phases: the first jhana, second jhana, third jhana, and fourth jhana. And what the Buddha is describing is some of the mental qualities that you're going to experience as you're moving into the first, second, third, and fourth jhana. The jhana, you could describe this as a meditative absorption or mental absorption. There has to be a certain amount of absorption of meditation and these other teachings that you're then practicing teachings and starting to transform the mind to a certain degree, and then you'll start experiencing these preliminary phases. And as you're experiencing these jhanas, it's like the light bulb is flickering, and you're starting to get these glimpses of what enlightenment is like. You start experiencing this peace and this joy that might last for a few seconds, a few minutes, maybe even an hour or two, or a day or two. But then because the mind is not yet enlightened, there'll be some discontentedness that's experienced. But you're going to start noticing as you put together all the factors of the Eightfold Path that the mind is starting to experience these mental qualities. And this is an indication for you that your practice is starting to be fairly well developed with the Eightfold Path. And now it's time to start focusing on what we call the 10 fetters, which are the 10 individual pollutions that you need to eliminate from the mind. So here with right concentration, in the Eightfold Path, the Buddha is describing the results or the benefits or the byproduct of having practiced all the teachings in the Eightfold Path. And now that's an indication for you that things are going well, you're putting together your practice fairly well. Now start focusing on the 10 fetters so that you can get into the first stage of enlightenment. Because once the mind is in the first stage of enlightenment and you're experiencing certain mental qualities, it won't regress backwards from there. When you're in the jhanas, the mind can actually regress backwards because the mind is not yet firmly in the first stage of enlightenment. So when you're in those jhanas and experiencing the flickering of these mental qualities, you'd like to stay dedicated, determined, and diligent, continuing to practice the Eightfold Path, but now starting to focus on the 10 fetters and starting to eliminate those 10 pollutions or taints or defilements. What a fetter is this is like a shackle around your ankle with a chain and a ball. It's like keeping a prisoner trapped. So these 10 fetters or 10 pollutions or 10 taints or defilements are keeping the mind trapped in the unenlightened state. And as you're eliminating these 10 fetters, you'll start experiencing more and more qualities of the enlightened mind. And everything that the Buddha is teaching in one way or another is helping you to eliminate those 10 fetters. So everything on the Eightfold Path is helping you to eliminate those 10 fetters. So as you're bringing the pollution down, that's why you start noticing these qualities of the jhanas coming through. And then as you're starting to do that, that's when you start focusing directly on the fetters. But everything he's already teaching you is helping you to eliminate those 10 fetters in one way or another. And you'll need these foundational teachings in the Eightfold Path in order to then practice those to ultimately help you eliminate the 10 fetters. What I'm going to do, instead of going through and talking about the byproduct or the results of what you're going to experience as part of putting together the Eightfold Path, because instead of talking about that today, because you're not going to be able to experience that in the next week or 2 or month, instead I'm going to explain to you how to practice right concentration. Because the Buddha teaches about how to practice right concentration in other parts of his teachings, because this is the core central teaching that everything else plugs into. So we're going to focus on talking about how to actually practice right concentration. And then when you're practicing right concentration and all the other steps gradually over the 7 months and 1 year and 2 years, as you're putting together these teachings gradually, then you'll start noticing these qualities of the jhanas at certain time. Everybody's a little bit different. There's not one specific set time frame because it all depends on how you practice and how you choose to train your mind. It depends on what level of pollution that is currently in your mind and the amount of time that you have to devote in this to take priority in your life. So let me share with you what right concentration is in terms of practicing it, so that way you then know how to actually practice this step and start to experience the benefits and the results of having done so. Right concentration is to develop a meditation practice and to practice singleness of mind in daily life. Developing your daily meditation practice is to develop breathing mindfulness meditation. This is why here at the very beginning of our group learning program, I've been teaching a 4-part series on breathing mindfulness meditation. If you haven't learned that yet, it's all recorded in Facebook, YouTube, and on our podcast. You can learn how to develop your breathing mindfulness meditation, where you're focused on the breath, and then whenever the mind moves off the breath, you're cutting off and letting go and bringing the mind back to the breath. What you're developing here is the wholesome qualities of mindfulness and concentration. That mindfulness is the awareness of mind, and the concentration is be able to focus on a single object like the breath. So 2-3 times a day, you're in meditation exercising the mind. That's what breathing mindfulness meditation is doing, is it's helping you to exercise the mind to develop these wholesome qualities of awareness of mind or mindfulness and concentration, where you have focus and clarity. You can focus and concentrate on a particular thing. Then when your mind moves off the breath, which you're going to notice, you cut that off and bring it back. You're building in this mental discipline, where in the past your mind could run away from you. Now more and more through your meditation, whenever you notice that the mind moves off the breath, you're cutting that off and letting it go and bringing the mind back to the breath. You're not trying to eliminate the thoughts with breathing mindfulness meditation. As long as you're alive, you're going to have thoughts. Even when the mind's enlightened and you're in meditation, it's going to move off the breath occasionally. So as you're in meditation, if 20 times, 30 times, 50 times in your meditation, you're having to cut off and let go and bring the mind back, this is training your mind to be able to easily let go. Because with craving, desire, attachment in the mind, that holding on, that longing and yearning for things, your mind's going to hold on. It's not going to want to let go. So in breathing mindfulness meditation, you're training to have this awareness of mindfulness, having that awareness of the mind so that you notice when the mind moves off the breath. And you're having that concentration to stay focused. And then you're training the mind to easily let go. So that now if you train that way in meditation, in your daily life where you see the mind is having the arising of unwholesome qualities, you can cut those off and let those go because you've been training your mind that way in meditation. And that's why you need a certain amount of accumulation or absorption, meditative absorption or mental absorption. The mind needs to absorb a certain amount of meditation because when we're off the path to enlightenment, it's kind of like the mind gets a little bit crusty, and what you're doing is you're awakening the mind, you're softening it up so that now you can gain control over it and bring the mind back to the breath. So that's what breathing mindfulness meditation is helping you to do, is cultivate the wholesome qualities of mindfulness and concentration and eliminate craving, desire, attachment by training the mind to easily let go. Then you're going to learn loving kindness meditation. As part of this group learning program, I teach a 4-part series on loving kindness meditation. This is a meditation that's going to help you eliminate anger, hatred, ill will, and all those lesser versions like frustration, irritation, annoyance. By the time you get to enlightenment, you're not even going to be slightly annoyed or have this slight dislike towards other beings. You're going to be able to eradicate all of that from the mind. So loving kindness meditation is a practice that you need to do in order to build up your loving kindness or this genuine interest in seeing all beings be well. What you will typically do is you'll build up your breathing mindfulness meditation first, maybe 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks. Everybody's a little bit different. Then you start bringing in loving kindness meditation, which I'm going to be teaching next week, about a week and a half from now. I'm going to start the 4-part series on loving kindness meditation. And remember, these are recorded, so you'll be able to watch them any day, even though the live class is on Wednesday. So with loving kindness meditation, it's like filling up your gas tank. And now you go out into the world and you start practicing through your intentions, your speech, and your actions to be loving and kind. That's where the real transformation is occurring. This loving kindness meditation is to transform your mind, to fill up your mind with loving kindness, this genuine interest in seeing all beings be well, this goodwill. And now when you go out into the world, the Buddha shares with you how to practice things like right intention, right speech, and right action. Because remember, right intention, you need the intention of non-ill will or goodwill, which is loving kindness. The intention of harmlessness. Remember the speech. The Buddha teaches about having a mind of loving kindness, using those 5 factors of well-spoken speech. So the loving kindness meditation is there as a tool and a technique to build up the loving kindness in the mind so that now you can go practice it. Then there's other specialized meditations that you use on an as-needed basis. These are things like meditation to eliminate sexual cravings and meditation to realize non-self. Not everybody's going to need these necessarily. Everybody's going to need breathing mindfulness meditation and loving kindness meditation. But these other 2 are taught for specialized situations. And I'm going to be introducing you to those when we get to chapter 11 of the book series. I'm going to be teaching you breathing mindfulness meditation, loving kindness meditation, but also these 2 other specialized forms of meditation. And if you would like to go see what those are, you're easily able to go to volume 1, chapter 11 and be able to see for yourself. But usually the way I use these, in addition to teaching them in classes and courses and retreats, is that as a student needs them, as we're meeting in personal guidance, I will share with them, this would be really helpful if you use this meditation or that meditation. So there's only 4 real meditations that you need in order to develop the mind towards enlightenment. You're going to absolutely need breathing mindfulness meditation, loving kindness meditation. And in rare situations or in specialized situations, there's these other two that are needed on an as needed basis. And what you would like to do is gradually develop your meditation practice of breathing mindfulness meditation along with loving kindness meditation to 2 or 3 sessions per day for 30 minutes or more. And again, you're going to need to gradually build up to that. And that's a total of 2 or 3 sessions, not 2 or 3 of each. So in a given day, you might meditate for 2 or 3 times, and one of those being breathing mindfulness and one of them being loving kindness. This 30 minutes or more per session is something that students need time to build up to. It often takes 6 months, a year, even 2 years to build up to that point. What you'll notice is that frequency is more important than duration. So if you're able to meditate once for 30 minutes a day per session, it would actually be better to do 2 sessions for 15 minutes. And then as you build that up, gradually expand to more than 15 minutes, to the point where you're at about 30 minutes. And again, it's going to take time for you to do that. As you're meditating, some people might choose to use an alarm, and that can be helpful if you've got to go somewhere and you only have 20 minutes to meditate or 30 minutes and you need an alarm. But in certain situations where you don't need an alarm, it's best to not use one. So maybe in the evenings or on the weekends, if you don't need an alarm, it's best to not use one. You can just look at the time before you start meditating, maybe 9 a.m. And then after you're done, you look, 9:15. Okay, I meditated for 15 minutes. And you'll know how long you've been meditating. And then about once a week, just kind of check in and work to gradually expand that. Whereas if you set an alarm, you'll probably be in meditation thinking, is it time yet? Is it time yet? Is it time yet? The mind's going to keep craving and longing and yearning to know if it's time yet. Or you're going to be deep in meditation, getting all kinds of benefit, and then the alarm's going to go off, and you could have actually gotten more benefit if you didn't set the alarm. So in situations where you need an alarm, of course, go ahead and use it. But in situations where you don't need one, maybe in the evenings or weekends, don't use an alarm and just allow the mind to soak into the meditation. And then just gradually build up your meditation practice, having these anchor points, maybe morning and evening, and try to get a midday meditation in there where you can, if you're able to gradually build up to that over the course of time. If you're going to be meditating in the evening, it's important that you start meditating before your mind gets tired or sleepy. Because if you normally go to bed at 10 p.m. and you start meditating at 10 p.m. or just before that, your mind's not going to be attentive and alert or active to be able to do this dedicated, active, purposeful training session to eliminate certain unwholesome qualities and cultivate certain wholesome qualities. So you would like your mind to be attentive and alert. So if you're going to meditate prior to sleep, which is sometimes very wise because it'll help you to sleep better, is you might decide to start around 9 or 9:30 so that then your mind can be attentive and alert during the meditation, and then when you're done, you can just go to sleep afterwards. This can really help you rather than waiting for the mind to be sleepy and then meditating. Be sure your mind's attentive and alert. There's no specific time to meditate. You can have these anchor points of morning and evening or midday, and then just somewhere along there, start developing your meditation practice. You're not going to be able to meditate at exactly the same time every day, so don't even try to set it up that way. You could have a goal of like, okay, I'm going to generally meditate around 8 a.m. if that's the time you normally wake up. But sometimes you're going to wake up earlier, sometimes you're going to wake up later, sometimes you're going to have something to do in the morning and you're not going to get to it until 9 or 10 a.m. So understand that your meditation practice is impermanent. But if you have these anchor points, now you can be consistently meditating over a long-term period of time. Your meditation isn't going to determine whether you get to enlightenment or not if you miss a specific meditation. So if you set up the plan that you're going to meditate, twice a day and you miss one, that doesn't mean you're not going to get to enlightenment, right? So if you miss a meditation today, that's not going to determine whether you get to enlightenment or not. It's what you do next. Do you allow yourself to continue to miss meditations over time, that it becomes 1 week, 1 month, 1 year, you haven't been meditating? But even if that happens, you can actually reinvigorate your meditation practice. Instead, what's going to determine your ability to get to enlightenment, among other things, is can you meditate consistently over a long-term period? 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, can you consistently be meditating? Of course, you're going to miss meditation here and there, especially as you're building up your practice. but over the long term, can you be consistently meditating and building up your practice? So this is the first aspect of right concentration, is developing a daily meditation practice and being diligent and determined to do that, but realizing there's going to be some impermanence in your meditation practice. And then the second part of this right concentration is to develop singleness of mind. What singleness of mind is where you're learning and training the mind to only do one thing at a time. Oftentimes we're taught to multitask, and our mind might be rapidly cycling from thing to thing to thing. You can't actually multitask. It's not possible for the mind to do more than one thing at a time. You'll be able to see that what the mind's truly doing is it's doing one thing for 3 seconds, it's doing another thing for 8 seconds, it's doing another thing for 10 seconds, and now it's doing this thing over here for 5 seconds, and it's just rapidly cycling from thing to thing to thing to thing to thing to thing to thing. And then when you get home and you're trying to rest or relax, you might notice your mind's stressed or having anxiety or it's overactive, because all throughout your day you've been rapidly cycling from thing to thing to thing to thing to thing to thing to thing. This is something that people started doing in the 1960s because computers came out. There was CPUs, computer chips that can actually do more than one thing at a time because it's a machine. And then as CPUs started coming out, people started to say, oh, well, let's try to do multitasking. And people think that this is actually going to produce more productivity. But when you learn what's really truly going on in the mind, you can see that it's actually creating a lot of problems in the mind, in that the mind isn't actually capable of multitasking. This is part of the intention of renunciation. The mind needs to see the truth about this. It needs to let go of this thought that the mind can somehow multitask. And you can see the truth for yourself that this multitasking is leading to different difficulties and struggles in your life because the mind might be overactive or having stress or anxiety. Or if you've ever been on a phone call, watched TV, and maybe been eating at the same time, and your mind's rapidly cycling through these, you can see the truth for yourself that when you get off the phone, you might be confused of what you even talked about. You might not even have any recollection of what you actually talked about because you weren't able to digest the conversation. And you might have to go back and clean that up because you might have said something that was unwise, or this person might have asked you to do something and you agreed to it, but you can't remember what it was that you agreed to. So you have to actually spend more time to now go back and clean that up. And the conversation might have lasted a lot longer than it would have otherwise. It could have been a 5 or 10 minute conversation perhaps, but instead it lasted for 45 minutes or an hour because the mind wasn't focused. And if you're going to apply right speech and right action, you're going to need to be able to talk on the phone and bring forth your full concentration in order to focus on the conversation. So if your mind is rapidly cycling from thing to thing to thing to thing to thing to thing, you're not going to be able to focus on the conversation in order to then have a meaningful conversation and do what you need to do and then get off and take action based on what it is that you need to take action with. And then if you're watching the TV while you're doing this, you're not truly digesting that content. And then if you're eating, you're not truly digesting the food, and you might even have a stomach ache after you're done. So sometimes what people do is while they're eating, they might be surfing the internet on a computer or a tablet or a phone or something like this, because just eating might feel bored to them. They might feel bored or lonely while they're doing that. That's because of the craving, desire, attachment in the mind. If you try to fill up your day and fill up your time with a tablet or a computer or a phone while you're eating, you might think you're solving the boredom, but you're really not, because the mind is now dependent. It's now attached or fixed to this electronic device, and it's not able to experience the peace and joy that if you didn't have this tablet with you, because it's not permanent, now when you're eating, you're going to be bored and lonely. So what you need to do is put the mind in that situation where you can be eating. And maybe initially it's a little bit of a struggle or difficult. Maybe you are bored. You're noticing that the mind is experiencing boredom or loneliness. But turning to a phone or a tablet isn't going to fix it. So you would like to gradually build up where you can gradually let go of this and just focus on eating. So when you're eating, you're eating. or when you're talking on the phone with mom or dad or a business partner or something like this, you're just talking on the phone. And if your mind's not used to doing this, you're going to need to gradually train your mind to be able to do it. That's why the breathing mindfulness meditation is there, to focus on the breath and get used to just doing one thing at a time. And more, when you exercise the mind in this way, then in daily life, you can practice this singleness of mind. You can bring the mind to this middle where it can perform optimally. The way that I think about it is, if you have a piece of wood and you have a piece of steel and you grind this steel back and forth on the wood, you're going to make this groove in the wood. Initially, that steel is going to pop out, and it's going to pop out all over the place because there's no groove there yet. But the more you grind back and forth with this steel, you're going to get a deeper and deeper groove, and it's going to be harder and harder for this steel to pop out. And when it does pop out, you're going to know that it's popped out and be able to easily bring it right back into the groove. So your mind is the same way. By you building up a consistent meditation practice, focusing on the breath, your mind gets used to being in the middle. And now you take those benefits of your meditation practice and you practice it in daily life, where you're practicing singleness of mind, where your mind's used to being in the middle. Initially, your mind's going to bounce around. You're going to be in a business meeting, your mind's wandering. You're going to be talking on the phone, your mind's daydreaming about something else. But where you see that with mindfulness, you now apply right effort to cut that off and let it go and bring the mind back to the middle, bring it back to the present moment, practicing singleness of mind in the present moment. So as you do this more and more, the mind will get more and more capable of staying in the present moment and staying in the middle. And then when it pops out, you'll know it. Eventually, you'll get to the point where the mind never pops out, but it takes training in meditation and in daily life for the mind to be able to do this. So let me know what questions you guys have on this step of right concentration, and I'll be able to help you to be able to understand it more fully. You can put it into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like. Okay, it looks like we have a question here from Vladimir in Zoom. Can attending services of other religions be helpful and be part of loving kindness meditation? For example, when Christians pray for health and wealth for humanity, basically as an understanding they wish well to all living beings, the same what we do during loving kindness meditation. Personally, on my own experience after these events, I feel more love to all living beings, and mind is more focused on not causing any harm. So these types of things that the Buddha is teaching, which he's tapping into the natural laws of existence, have been discovered to a certain degree by other teachers too, like Jesus Christ. His mind was awake to a certain degree, and he tapped into these in different ways. So what a Christian is doing through praying, the mind is not yet 100% understanding what the goal is, but there is some aspect of what we would call loving kindness meditation in that prayer. In a prayer, oftentimes Christian might be asking God to change things. They're not understanding the natural law of karma. And Jesus even taught the natural law of karma. He taught you reap what you sow, right? That's the natural law of karma. But now, 2,000 years after the death of Jesus, there's people who, just like the teachings of the Buddha, they've gotten farther and farther away from the teachings of what Jesus taught. So there are other things you can be doing, but here what you're learning on the path to enlightenment with the teachings of the Buddha is how he trained his mind to get to this enlightened mental state. And you can do those kinds of things. If you decide to go to church or to a Christian service, sure, that's your choice. It's always up to you of what you might choose to do. But if you're in any kind of service like that, and there's people that are asking God to create change, and you hear this going on, just be sure you understand the truth that any change that's going to come about in your life is going to be a result of your decisions. God is not going to intervene on your behalf and change things in your life. You need to be able to do that work. And Jesus taught essentially the same thing, but people just aren't necessarily understanding this. So yeah, you can see some similarities between Jesus, Prophet Muhammad, the Buddha, Hindu teachings, and all these other traditions that are out there. And in fact, in Volume 1, Chapter 1, that's what I actually talk about, is helping people to see these connections. While there's connections and there's a lot of similarities, there's also some grave differences that can confuse the mind if you didn't understand what those differences are. So at different times in our program, I'm going to be cluing you in to these similarities, but also to the differences so that you'll understand. So yes, Vladimir, I understand what you're sharing, and this can be something that you could practice, but just be sure that you understand the truth that any change in your life needs to come about through your own activity, and you can't change other people through prayer or through meditation. You can't change others. Instead, what you're doing on this path is you're working to train your own mind and creating interchange within your own mind, and each individual person needs to decide to do that work for themselves. I'm going to take a look and see if we have any questions here on YouTube or on Facebook. It looks like we have some questions here on YouTube. Hello, if I am having depressive thoughts, is that when I should stop and meditate breathing techniques? What do I concentrate or focus on at that time in breathing meditation? Yes, you can actually do that. Where you're experiencing any sadness or depressive thoughts, some people in the world even experience suicidal thoughts. These same things were happening during the lifetime of the Buddha, and he taught to do breathing mindfulness meditation, that it eliminates evil, unwholesome mental states on the spot. But it's not like a magical thing. Like if someone hasn't been meditating and they're having depressive thoughts, if they sit down and meditate, they're not going to instantly magically be able to get rid of those. But as you're gradually building up your practice of 2 or 3 times a day for 30 minutes or more, what you'll notice is you'll accumulate more and more benefits. Where initially you can experience some benefits. Even I've seen students in as short as 2 days experience benefits, and they've shared with me those benefits. But then as you practice and you accumulate more and more benefits, you'll notice that you can start looking to breathing mindfulness meditation when you're having any unwholesome thought, whether it's depressive or, like I was describing, like having sexual cravings going outside of a relationship, or say the mind is longing, yearning, and wanting particular things, and longing, yearning for things. Any kind of unwholesome qualities that are coming up in the mind, you can use breathing mindfulness meditation to help you cut that off and let it go. And then as you develop that in meditation, you'll be able to do that more readily in daily life, where you'll be able to internally cut off and let go. But as you're first getting started, another tip that I can give you guys here, in addition to meditation, is you can actually redirect the mind. So say someone's at home on the sofa, on the couch, having depressive thoughts. Rather than just sit there and allow the mind to ruminate and be obsessive about that and just constantly be kicking up in the mind, you can redirect the mind. You can go out for a walk. You can go for a bike ride. You can, go somewhere else in your house, maybe grab a book and read a book. This will redirect the mind towards something else. And it'll train the mind to let go and no longer be wired to have this conditioned feeling of the depressive thoughts. You can dismantle that and now train the mind to not have those conditioned feelings anymore. So when you're redirecting the mind, you're not allowing the mind to dwell in those unwholesome feelings or unwholesome thoughts, and now more and more the mind gets trained to no longer do that. So with mindfulness, that awareness of mind, if you can catch those depressive thoughts or any other unwholesome thoughts sooner and sooner, then you can apply right effort sooner and sooner to redirect the mind, or use breathing mindfulness meditation, which is going to redirect the mind. And then this will become more and more beneficial to you, because initially your mind's not going to want to let go. But over time, as you implement these teachings more readily, the mind will be trained to let go, and you'll find it easier and easier. Excellent questions, guys. And here's a question as well on YouTube from Becky. I have to literally say breathe in and breathe out to remotely focus while in meditation. Otherwise, my mind goes all over the place constantly. This will get better with practice. And that's the question. The answer is yes. That when you first get started, that's why I'm helping students with guidance and kind of guiding students through their meditation. And some students will use a podcast or YouTube video of mine in order to use it as a guide. And there's times where you might need to sit there and tell your mind, breathe in, breathe out, and just kind of slowly do that. But you would like to more and more get away from that as you develop your practice, where you can just sit down or lay or stand or walk and do meditation, and you don't need those reminders. But as you're getting started, you may need those reminders, and that will be really helpful for you to get started. But then within a period of time, you would like to gradually start letting that go and not allowing the mind to hold on to that constant guidance that you have in the mind, because all that's happening there is whatever thought you would have had, you're replacing that thought with breathe in and breathe out. So the mind hasn't truly let go. So in a particular meditation session, if you need a little bit of breathe in, breathe out to get you started, then let it fade away and don't do it anymore. Even if it's like 1 minute or 2 minutes or 3 minutes. And then if you need to bring it back in, okay, bring it back in. But that 2 or 3 minutes, you were there meditating without any thoughts in terms of breathe in and breathe out, right? But then if you need to bring it back in, okay, bring it back in, but then try to go again for maybe now 3, 4, 5 minutes where you're not using the breathe in, breathe out. And then over time, you would like to get to a point where you don't need that anymore. But that can be helpful as you're getting started. Here's a question from Rhonda on YouTube. In breathing mindfulness meditation in my yoga classes, I teach that you are literally focusing on the sensation of the breath as it enters and leaves the body. You can feel it come and go. Yeah, so what you would like to do with the breath is either focus on the sound of the breath coming into the nose or the sensation of the air moving over the skin into the nose. This is the breath. This is the present moment. That's why you're focusing the mind on the breath, because it is the present moment. What the mind typically wants to do in the unenlightened state is it either wants to be in the past or it wants to be in the future. And now when you're in meditation, your mind's going to the past and thinking about all these pleasurable things or all these painful things that are happened in the past, or it's going to be in the future, thinking about all these pleasant things you want to have happen in the future, or these painful things that you're afraid about happening in the future. And now, because the mind's in the past or the future, it can't reside peaceful and joyful. So by focusing the mind on the breath in meditation, you're bringing the mind into the present moment more and more. And now, as you exercise the mind in that way, it'll get used to doing that in meditation, and then in daily life, you'll get more and more used to the mind being in the middle and being in the present moment. That's that steel on the wood going back and forth, creating the groove. So the meditation is there to help you do that, and the practicing of singleness of mind in daily life is there to help you to be able to do that. Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions anywhere. So let me go forward into some additional things that I was going to share with you guys. Here in the various classes that I share, I often will teach the jhanas, and I will break down what the jhanas are and explaining to you what they are in detail. But here I'm just showing it to you in case you would like to screenshot it or otherwise capture it for your electronic device. And then you might decide to look at it some other time. But if you take enough classes and courses and retreats with me, there's going to be a time where I go through and I will actually explain what the jhanas are. But right now, it's going to be too much information and you're not going to be experiencing them anytime soon, most likely. So it's better to focus on the core Eightfold Path and get you up and running with that. But here's where I've broken down the individual jhanas so that you can see the mental qualities that you're going to experience as you're moving into the jhanas. One of them that I can give you a heads up on is by the time the mind moves into the second jhana, you're going to experience what's called unification of the mind or oneness of mind. In the unenlightened state, you have a conscious mind and you have a subconscious mind. And the conscious mind is polluted with the 10 fetters, but the subconscious mind is oftentimes even more heavily polluted. If you've ever been in a conversation before and you were just having your conversation and then you just blurted something out and you were like, what did I say? Why did I even say that? I don't even know where that came from. That's the subconscious mind motivating non-virtuous and unskillful conduct because it's oftentimes more polluted than the conscious mind, and it's sending this pollution up into the conscious mind, and you might blurt something out that you regret later. But by the time you develop your mind with breathing mindfulness meditation and practicing singleness of mind in daily life, you will ultimately get to the second jhana, which among other qualities, you're going to experience this oneness of mind, or this unification of the mind, where now you have full awareness of the entire mind. There's no such thing as a conscious mind and a subconscious mind by the time you experience oneness of mind or unification of the mind. And this is what you're going to need in order to be able to apply right mindfulness and right effort to eliminate certain unwholesome qualities and cultivate certain wholesome qualities. You're going to need to be able to have full awareness of the mind. So as you develop your mind on the Eightfold Path with meditation and this other aspects of mental discipline, but also with the moral conduct and the wisdom section, now as you fully develop your Eightfold Path, you're going to notice the mind moving through these various phases, and you'll notice that you'll eventually get to the point where you have full awareness of the mind. And this is really helpful because now you can sort out what's going on in terms of the unwholesome qualities and the wholesome qualities and start really fine-tuning the mind at this point. So these are the jhanas and what you'll experience as you're moving through these various jhanas. And if you ever have any questions on them, you're always welcome to ask through the Facebook group, through the online classes, through sending a private message or scheduling personal guidance, and I will help you. Then let's just kind of talk about a summary of what we've been discussing so far in the class. There's right effort, which is taking initiative to eliminate unwholesome aspects of the mind and cultivate certain wholesome qualities in the mind. Taking the initiative or the effort, the energy, the motivation, not allowing the mind to be complacent, that you take the effort to arise certain wholesome qualities and eliminate certain unwholesome qualities. Then there's right mindfulness, which initially you can just think about as awareness of the mind, that you would like to develop this awareness of what's going on in the mind. But ultimately over time, you would like to develop the 4 foundations of mindfulness, where you start to understand the bodily sensations, the feelings, the condition of the mind, and the mental object. And you start being aware of what these are so that you can identify when they're happening, and then you can apply right effort to eliminate this from the mind so that the mind's no longer experiencing conditioned feelings, but you can get to this unconditioned happiness and this unconditioned joy. Then we talked about right concentration, which is the practice of meditation and developing singleness of mind to experience the jhanas as you're putting together all the aspects of the Eightfold Path. And there's breathing mindfulness meditation and loving kindness meditation that you'd like to gradually learn and gradually build up. And if you need the recordings on that, you can go back and look, because I taught part 1 of 4 of where I taught breathing mindfulness meditation, and then I've been guiding you each Wednesday in doing breathing mindfulness meditation so that you can build that up. And here soon we're going to be doing loving kindness meditation, starting with the first class on Wednesday about a week and a half from now, where I will teach it to you and do it with you. And then over the successive classes on Wednesday, I will guide you in loving kindness meditation so you can get comfortable with learning how to do that and build that up in your practice. So essentially what you're doing on this path to enlightenment is you're building up your practice of learning, reflecting, and practicing to start out the core central teachings of the 3 universal truths, the 4 noble truths, the Eightfold Path, the 5 precepts, and you're developing a meditation practice so that as you start experiencing the jhanas, you now start focusing on eliminating the 10 fetters, which our next class next week is going to be focusing on. I'm going to be teaching you the 10 fetters and the 4 stages of enlightenment. And then after that, we're going to start with chapter 1 of the book, and we're going to go from there all the way through all the chapters. But next class will be the last class of kind of our preview of what the path to enlightenment is before we start chapter 1. So these are like the core central teachings that you're going to learn as part of this group learning program, but there's also other teachings that you're going to be learning as part of this group learning program that you need as a foundational program and foundational teachings as well. So I'm going to be guiding you through learning all of these, helping you to understand how to reflect and then understand how to practice them. But then you are going to need to do the actual work. This is your own independent journey of developing this life practice. And all of these teachings that I'm sharing here, even though we're doing this preview with the first 4 classes of the group learning program, we're going to be teaching these again. When we get to chapter 4, I'm going to be teaching you the 3 universal truths and the 4 noble truths. When we get to chapter 5, I'm going to be teaching you the Eightfold Path as one particular class. And then in chapter 7, I'm going to be teaching you the 5 precepts. Chapter 11, we're going to be talking about developing your meditation practice. And then, of course, on Wednesdays, we're going to be doing that as well. So if you have just recently joined into the group learning program, you have the recordings to go back and see what I've been teaching so far. But also going forward, I'm going to be revisiting these topics as we go forward, particularly things like the Four Noble Truths. That's so important. We probably discuss it maybe 4 or 5 different times, or kind of touch on it 4 or 5 different times in our program, so that you can really get that well rooted in the mind. So let me see what questions you guys might have related to the teachings that I've been sharing so far. You can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, and I'll be able to answer any questions that you might have. Looks like we have a question here from Vladimir on Zoom. He says, what English definition will be more accurate to describe Dhamma? What is your personal opinion about usage of similes for explaining Dhamma by Ajahn Chah and his students? Are they helpful for learners, and should we use similes for understanding of Dhamma? So the word Dhamma, it's a Pali word that means teachings. It's the teachings of the Buddha. So I just translate that as the teachings, or the teachings of the Buddha, because that word Dhamma, if you had to learn a bunch of Pali to then be able to learn the teachings of the Buddha and then to reflect on them and then practice them, it would take you a really long time to get to enlightenment. It would probably take you 15, 20 years to even learn the Pali language, because it's not a spoken language anymore. So I just use the English translations. And then even if you learn Pali, there's a very limited number of people that are actually able to understand Pali. So your ability to get help in the teachings would be very limited and very narrow. And then because it's no longer a spoken language, people don't agree on what one word means versus another word. So there's a lot of impermanence as it relates to the Pali language. So I've put everything into English except for the word Kamma and Jhana, which I still use, but I define what that is. So you'll find that I use all these English words, because then you can learn in a language that you're already familiar with, and then immediately start learning, reflecting, and practicing, getting benefit, rather than putting a 15, 20-year obstacle in front of you to be able to learn Pali first. So that's what the word Dhamma means. In terms of the similes that are maybe described by Ajahn Chah or any of his students, I haven't studied any of those things. I haven't studied with Ajahn Chah's teachings or any of his students. So I don't know what similes they're actually using and what stories that they actually use. If they're using the ones of the Buddha, that the Buddha used, these are outstanding. The Buddha used various similes and various stories to explain his teachings. And this is one of the ways that you help your students to learn an oral tradition, is you have stories, which the mind will have a tendency to remember stories. You teach in a repetitive way, that you repeat yourself more than one time in a given teaching, and you come up with lists. We have things like the Four Noble Truths, the 3 Universal Truths, the Eightfold Path, the 5 Precepts, the 7 Factors of Enlightenment. All these different things are various lists, because if you only remember 5 or 6, then you know that there's 8-fold path, and what are those other steps that you'll tend to remember. So using analogies and stories are very helpful, but I can't necessarily describe anything from Ajahn Chah or his students, because I didn't study any of those things from him. But if you're ever curious, you can send me a certain simile or a certain story or something, and you can ask, David, does this accurately reflect the Four Noble Truths, or the Eightfold Path, or the 4 Foundations of Mindfulness, or any of these other teachings? Because I can read a certain simile, and then I can see how it relates to the teachings of the Buddha, because that's what I'm well versed in, is the actual words of the Buddha, rather than all the things that everybody else might be teaching related to that. Because over the 2,500 years, people have gotten farther and farther away from his teachings. So what I decided to do is go back to the core teachings in the own words of the Buddha, because that's where you can see what he did teach and what he didn't teach. But there are people out there that are maybe either enlightened or very close to enlightenment that are using certain stories or analogies, and they're able to then describe certain aspects of the teaching. So if you have those, or you come across any of those, you can always run them past me, and I'll be able to help you by looking at those and reading those and providing any guidance that I might provide as part of helping you to get to enlightenment. Looks like Francis has a question here. I still have a bit of uncertainty about the third foundation of mindfulness in the condition of the mind. Please clarify again. Okay, so the condition of the mind is how the mind has been affected by the feelings. So once the anger comes into the mind, it's now a feeling. It's a feeling of anger. The mind feels anger. But now that feeling can affect the condition of the mind more long term, like maybe for a few hours or a few days or for a few weeks, where the mind is now angry and agitated. That's like the state of the mind or the condition of the mind. The feeling is just the feeling, like all of a sudden, boom, the mind's angry, right? And you might do whatever you're going to do, but then by the mind having that feeling, it now can affect the condition of the mind. If you haven't cut off and let go as a bodily sensation or a feeling, now it can affect the condition of the mind where the mental state or the mental quality or the aspect of the mind is being affected more long term, like a few hours, a few days, maybe a week or two. If you've ever been angry for a week or two, that was the condition of the mind, that it was started out as a feeling, but then it affected the condition of the mind. So I'm not seeing any questions here on YouTube, and I don't see any on Facebook either. So what I'm going to do then is go ahead and end class by just thanking all of you for choosing to join for the group learning program and deciding to dedicate some time today to learn and practice these teachings, because as you do, it's helping you, it's helping those close to you and all of humanity. And as you guys have questions like this, it's helping you to gain clarity on what the teachings are. So feel free to ask these questions during the classes and all those other ways that I mentioned that you have the ability to ask questions. In our next class on Sunday, we're going to be discussing the 10 fetters. These are the 10 individual pollutions that the Buddha discovered. I'm going to explain to you what they are and how to eliminate them from the mind. Essentially, is what you're doing on this path to enlightenment. You're trying to eliminate these 10 fetters. You're not going to be able to actually do it in this 1 week, right? Like each one of these previews that I'm giving you in this beginning part of the group learning program is helping you to be able to see this overview, to be able to understand what the path to enlightenment is. And then we're going to start chapter by chapter and go through and explain to you how to actually go forward from week to week. And then some students even take this program more than one time. So you're going to get an overview of what the 10 fetters are and how they're eliminated from the mind so that you'll start to become aware of what those are. And then I'm going to teach you what's called the 4 stages of enlightenment that the mind's going to go through as you're eliminating those 10 fetters. So far, I've taught you and shared with you this overview, but on a deeper level of how to put together the Eightfold Path. And then that's going to lead to experiencing those preliminary phases of the jhanas. And now we're going to go beyond that and look at the 10 fetters and the 4 stages of enlightenment. But realizing that in these 4 weeks, you haven't implemented these teachings and you haven't been able to experience all the benefits, but it's a gradual development of the mind. So understand that you're going to need to just gradually learn these things over time. And now I'm just taking some time to walk you through and be able to see what these teachings are so that you'll have a perspective of what they are as we then get started moving chapter by chapter in the program. And then on Wednesday, I'm going to be in the 4th part of a 4-part series on breathing mindfulness meditation. So you're welcome to attend that live or listen to the replay if you like. I'm going to guide students in meditation. And then those Wednesday classes, it's a free-form questions. You can ask any and all questions. So if like right now you've got your questions answered to a certain degree, or maybe you didn't ask any questions, but over the coming days you might think about certain questions, you can ask those in the online class on Wednesday because it's a free-form day to ask any and all questions that you like. And then of course you have the Facebook group, you have private messages, and you're able to schedule appointments with me by going to our website. You'll see a link to schedule appointments, and then we'll meet in Zoom one-on-one, and I'll be able to help you with any questions or personal guidance that you might need, because a teacher of Buddhist teachings is kind of like a life coach, someone who's here to assist you as you're meeting with struggles and challenges and difficulties. You can reach out and ask for help. We don't charge you anything. We don't expect anything from you. But when you're learning in these classes, you're learning to a certain level of detail. And then as you guys ask questions, we go deeper into the detail in the classes. But then you might get to a point where you're like, okay, well, now how do I apply this to this specific situation? Which you can ask in these classes if you're like to and if you're comfortable, but you can also schedule personal guidance to be able to now talk about your specific issue with your life partner, your children, your boss, your coworkers, your mom, your dad, your life partner, any individuals, any challenges or struggles you're experiencing. That's what that's there for. So feel free to use it. You're not bothering me. This is what I do day in and day out, as I'm helping people to learn the path to enlightenment, and doing personal guidance as part of the help that you're going to need to be able to develop your life practice. So thank you all for joining. I appreciate your dedication and diligence to learning. We'll see you guys in one of these future classes. Have a very lovely and wonderful rest of your day. Sawadee Kap.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. To provide support for this podcast, visit patreon.com/support Buddha. To access more teachings, visit buddhadailywisdom.com. There, you will discover a full range of courses, retreats, and online resources to assist you on the path to enlightenment. Remember to establish a daily, consistent meditation practice, along with learning and practicing these teachings. A well-developed meditation practice is the foundation in which to train the mind to attain enlightenment.